just got back from my tour down to southern Utah. It was a 6-day trip and I covered just barely over 800 miles. And the trip was a huge success. I felt pretty good throughout the trip, and I can imagine doing 4.5 of those back to back. So I feel ready to show up at the start line for the wheel race. I definitely had some surprises and learned some things along the way too. I remembered, I looked up on a tire pressure calculator and learned the correct pressure to run for my tubeless setup with my heavily weighted bike. And I completely misremembered the correct pressure. And so I ended up inflating my tires to 50, and I had my first very dramatic blowout of the tubeless tire. I was sat still taking photos of a beautiful lake, and my rear tire just exploded off of the rim and was just sitting there. So then I fixed it. I put the tube in and got the tire working again, and then I looked up in the calculator and realized I was supposed to be closer to 30, not 50. So that was a completely self-imposed mechanical and a huge mistake and a lesson learned. I found that it was difficult to eat enough. I was close, but not quite there, eating something like 75 or 80% of the calories I was burning every day, which when you want to string together a month of this kind of effort is going to be a big problem. So I continue to try to look for ways to get more calories in every day when I'm on the road. I was pleased with my weather equipment. I went down there thinking that I was going to get a little heat exposure and get to practice riding in the heat, which is one of my a thing that I'm more hesitant about and less practiced at. But the weather ended up being the opposite, and I had very pleasant weather down in southern Utah, and on the way there and back I encountered a couple of rain showers and 2 different snow showers. But my rain jacket and layering seems to take care of that pretty well. I didn't bring my waterproof gloves on this trip, and I'll definitely bring them on the real trip because cold, wet hands are pretty miserable. I thought that sleeping 8 hours a night would be pretty doable, and I still think it'll be doable to get close. But it's amazing how much the little bits of time off the bike add up. So I was only ending up riding 10 or 11-hour days where I hope to be closer to 12 for the wheel race. So I need to get a little bit more efficient with my time off the bike. And one thing I intend to do is to make more room in my handlebar bags so that I can bring snacks and drinks from the gas station with me on the road more easily. Because that's one place I notice that I'm losing some time is I sit at the gas station and take a break and have my sugary beverage and my sugary snack and usually get on my phone and chat with some people, and that's a good way to turn what could have been a 5-minute stop into a 20 or 30-minute stop, and it doesn't take many of those before your day is a lot different than you hoped it would be. So I hope to improve at that. My route that I planned had several stretches of gravel road, and once I got to them, a lot of the time I opted to stay on the paved road instead because it was easier. And that's not going to be an option in the wheel race. So I'm going to have to toughen up and ride the dirt and go slower and have a rougher experience, and it's going to be fine. So there were 2 different times where I was really questioning my mission on this trip. The first one was on the very first night. I rode further than I did on any of the other days. I had probably ridden about 175 miles to get to the motel that I hoped to stay at. And I arrived there at maybe 9, which was right around sunset. And there was a sign on the door saying, "For reservations before 8 p.m., call our number." And I called the number anyway. No one answered. I could tell the people were in a room right next to the office, but I was too shy to knock on the door. And I pressed on another 15 miles down the road to the next place that had a motel. But during the push to the first motel, and then especially during the push to the second motel, I was so focused on just getting to a place where I could stop that I forgot to eat and drink properly. And when I got to the second motel where I was able to stay, I was absolutely wrecked. And as soon as I got there, I realized that I was going to be vomiting. And it was proof that I hadn't been eating enough. There was nothing there. And so that was a night of tough recovery and feeling pretty stupid for having made such a big mistake on my first day. And the other really tough time was right at the end. I routed myself to come home. I routed myself up over Big Mountain Pass. Big Cottonwood Canyon to Guardsman Pass is the fourth toughest climb in the state of Utah, and one that I've never done before. I've come up Guardsman, which is half as long, because on the Salt Lake side, the elevation's much lower, so you have to climb 5K from that side. You only have to climb 2.5K to get to the top of Guardsman from Park City. So I said, why not? Why not do this 5K climb at the end of my longest ride yet? And I checked the weather right before I started up, and the weather said no precipitation is likely. I could see some high overcast clouds, but they looked pretty thin and pale. It didn't look like it was going to rain on me. And sure enough, about a third of the way into the climb, it started to rain, and by the time I reached the summit, it was snowing. And so it was a really long, slow climb in unpleasant weather, and I didn't even get to enjoy the descent because I was shivering and the road was wet, and I didn't want to lose control during a fast descent, so I had to ride the brakes the whole way down. But I made it. So that's it. That was my last big practice tour. I'll be doing some little local rides for the next 2 weeks, and I'll be setting off 2 weeks from yesterday. So I'll see you in Seattle. For Ultracycling magazine, this is Jen Kelly.
This is Gregory Zuber, thanking you for watching and sharing.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.